Welcome to Canada's most irreverent talk show. This is the Andrew Lawton Show, brought to you by True North.
Coming up, Erin O'Toole is the new Conservative Party of Canada leader. How does it happen? What does it mean? And where does the party go from here?
The Andrew Lawton Show starts right now.
Hello and welcome to another edition of The Andrew Lawton Show, Canada's most irreverent talk show here on True North, the first day of Erin O'Toole's leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. It is Monday, August 24th, conveniently the same day that I wrapped up the last show because I was doing, alongside my friend and colleague Candace Malcolm, the True North Live Conservative Leadership Results Show, which we thought would be over and done with on Sunday and ended up stretching into the ungodly hours of Monday morning. But it is a big day, a big week for Conservative politics and by extension for Canadian politics. So I want to get to some of the big stories. The big one, yes, Erin O'Toole emerged victorious on the third ballot. He won with a pretty decisive margin, although up until the votes were finally revealed, which came after a delay that I'll get to in a little while, I don't think many people knew just how decisive it was going to be. And I had spoken ahead of the results show yesterday, and actually during the show as well, with Fred Delory, who was Erin O'Toole's campaign manager. And he was predicting an Erin O'Toole win, but he was predicting a win on the third ballot. So he, again, didn't think it was going to be some blowout on the first ballot or even the second ballot. But what we saw was down ballot support from Derek Sloan went to Leslyn Lewis, and Leslyn Lewis's support overwhelmingly went to Erin O'Toole. And that part of the story makes Leslyn Lewis not just a formidable candidate in her own right, but very much the kingmaker. She delivered that victory to Erin O'Toole, and I think that means that a message has been sent about her, about the values she's standing up for, the values that Peter MacKay called a stinking albatross around the neck of the conservative movement in Canada. So that is the top-level story that I think emerged from the race, and certainly everyone online, even a lot of people from the mainstream media, are lauding Leslyn Lewis for her campaign and lauding her campaign manager, Steve Outhouse, who we've spoken to a number of times as well. I want to talk about a couple of the aspects of this that came out, but first I want to share a section from Erin O'Toole's acceptance speech, his victory speech, which was delivered after 1 a.m. Like I said earlier, when all is said and done, it took a very long time. We started our show at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and it was expected that we would have a little 30-minute window to do a pre-show, and then the party would take over at 6, and then we'd do a little bit of a recap after. And it ended up being where the joke was on us because I signed off at, I believe, 1:40 a.m. So it was 8 hours and 9 minutes, which I believe is the longest I've ever spoken uninterrupted. My wife may say that I've spoken longer than that, or it feels like I speak longer than that, but I believe that is an ultimate record for me for speaking with no commercial breaks. We had a few videos we could throw to, but it was Candace and I the whole way through, right up until just a few hours ago, actually, as a matter of fact, because I'm recording this Monday morning. But don't worry, I have the coffee. We are good to go. But I want to share some of Erin O'Toole's acceptance speech to give you a sense of the tone that he's charting, because he was running as a true blue conservative, but his acceptance speech was one that said he's trying to unite. He is standing up for all of the values that he talked about in the leadership race, but he is going to be winning support from everyone. That was the goal. That was the message. And there was something in that I thought was very interesting. Let's roll that.
We need a leader who puts Canadians first and will stand up for Canada and our interests in a challenging world where we've lost the respect of our friends and allies. The world still needs more Canada. It just needs less Justin Trudeau. Why should I be that leader? Because I believe that whether you are black, white, brown, or from any race or creed, whether you are LGBT or straight, whether you are an Indigenous Canadian or have joined the Canadian family 3 weeks ago or 3 generations ago, whether you're doing well or barely getting by, whether you worship on Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, or not at all, you are an important part of Canada, and you have a home in the Conservative Party of Canada. Maybe you have voted for a different party your whole life, or have never voted at all. Maybe you feel that as a union member, you should not vote for our party. Maybe you feel let down repeatedly by politicians. Maybe your family came to Canada for better, but you are still waiting for fair treatment. Maybe you run a small business and work all day only to be called a tax cheat by your own government. It is time for many Liberal and NDP voters to socially distance themselves from those out-of-touch parties. It is time for more Canadians to look at the Conservative Party again.
I've already seen some cynics online say, oh, he's already pivoting, he's already ignoring everything he talked about up until this point, and I think it's too early to say that. There were some very specific promises that O'Toole made that he can be kept to. One of them, most notably for a lot of people in Canada's Conservative movement, was his pledge to defund CBC. Now, yeah, this is a red meat policy item for the base, but it's also very easily demonstrated whether he's doing it or not. So I'd like to see, is that going to be on the platform? Can you guarantee that's going to be on the platform at the very first opportunity? Other things he stood up for, like resisting cancel culture. Well, we'll see very quickly if that is something he's living up to by whether Conservative candidates are being disqualified, by if he's standing up for free speech. He stood up for independent press. Is that going to continue? So I think it's incumbent upon the Conservative movement and independent journalists like yours truly to continue to hold Erin O'Toole to his leadership promises, to the good ones anyway, and to hold him to those commitments he made so that it doesn't become tempting to do that pivot between the leadership and the general election, as is so common. So that's where my priority is, and it's where a lot of other people's priorities are and need to be. And this is not to say we're being critical of him or distrustful or anything like that. I think generally speaking, a healthy skepticism or healthy cynicism is appropriate when it comes to political promises. I've had a lot of people ask me who I was backing, and I can tell you, quite frankly, I wasn't backing anyone. I've had candidates that I've liked and candidates that, with one notable example, I disliked only because they weren't making themselves available. That was my only bugaboo with Peter MacKay, was the resistance to social conservative voices in the party and the fact that he just didn't want to talk. He didn't want to do interviews. He didn't want to do the independent press gallery debate. He didn't want to make himself available in a way that every other candidate was to conservative audiences. And I'm not claiming victory for Erin O'Toole's win, but I do think there is a dynamic shift in there in why Derek Sloan, who again is a rookie MP, not well known, Leslyn Lewis, completely unknown before the leadership race, and Erin O'Toole, who ultimately won, why they did so well, because we can see in their numbers that they were tapping into the conservative base. They were tapping into a conservative audience. And all three of those candidates were unafraid to do independent media interviews and availabilities. They were speaking to True North. They were speaking to Rebel. They were speaking to Post Millennial. They were speaking to all of these places. And you can't expect that you're going to win over broad spectrum support from conservatives if you aren't speaking on the platforms that conservatives are tuning into. I look at the numbers that we had on our live stream, and I haven't seen the final total yet, but we had tens of thousands of people that were watching our broadcast, and at some point that was actually higher than the ones who were watching some of the mainstream media's online streams. And I know they had people watching on TV and stuff like that, but for an independent startup that doesn't have a $1.3 billion budget, that's not getting any of the media bailout money, to get that sort of audience, I think, is important because it is a conservative-friendly zone. And I don't say that because it's about the capital C Conservative Party, but we're going to give the right a fair shake. And we're doing this because, I lean conservative. I don't hide that at all. I don't hide the bias. But we are talking about the leadership race in a context that matters to conservatives. Look, CTV and CBC were having Liberal and NDP people on to talk about all the things the conservatives need to do. And I'm thinking, wait, why on earth are we taking cues from the opposition, from the opponents, as to what a conservative is supposed to be? And it's chasing that love and chasing that affection from the mainstream media, from the left, that has gotten conservatives in trouble in the past, because you're never going to get it. You're never going to win them over. I want to talk for a few moments here about Andrew Scheer, who gave his farewell speech last night, his last speech as leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. And there were some things that he said in there that actually I think he was testing material when I sat down and did my exit interview with him a couple of weeks ago. For example, he made one observation, and I'm actually going to play the clip now because I think he worded it better in his speech last night, where he talks about the fact that people need to be given the choice to choose small government and given the choice to choose freedom. And his thesis is that people will always make that choice. Let's roll that clip.
It may be tempting to use the government to address the challenges society often faces, but once invited inside, the government is a terrible house guest. It may feel good to vote in a party that is going to overstep the limits of government in order to do something you agree with. However, that invitation is quickly used to justify all sorts of actions you might never have considered. It is far better to keep government within strictly defined limits and leave the rest of society to fulfill its proper role. That is why Conservatives put their faith in people. We know that there is more to society than just government, and that free people within a free market, working hard and enjoying the fruits of their labor, free to express themselves and live their lives the way they want. That is the recipe for success every single place it's been tried. When given a choice between societies where governments control more and more of their citizens' lives and those where freedom and opportunity are protected, people will always choose freedom. After all, no one ever got shot trying to jump the wall to get into East Berlin or paddle the raft to get to Cuba. We don't even have to go back into the past to see these examples. We just need to look at the mess happening right now in Venezuela and all the tragedy that it is causing.
And I do think there's something in that yes, we can talk about how we wish that we heard it from Andrew Scheer in the election and before that, and I think that's all fair game. But I share that with you not to dwell in the past, but to say that I really hope that form of a narrative, that form of rhetoric is something that Erin O'Toole can embrace, is something that he will embrace. And talk about, yes, putting your positive conservative vision forward, that's fine, but understand what the conservative part is of that conservative vision. And that is the best advice I can give to anyone. You were elected by members because you were the real conservative, or you were the most electable conservative, or you were the person that they liked the most. You never know completely why people are voting. But regardless, you are now the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. And if the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada ceases to stand up for conservatives and conservative ideas, the party ceases to be a conservative party. And it's that simple. We don't need someone else to go after the Liberal votes and the NDP votes and the mainstream media intelligentsia. We need someone that's going to stand up for free markets, for free speech, all of these things. So that's what I hope. And again, a lot of this comes back to independent media. And I'm going to play one more clip from Andrew Scheer here. This one is a little bit gratuitous. I hope you'll forgive me. But this is, I think, an important one and an important message, not just because of the message itself, but the response to it from the mainstream media. Let's roll that.
So it doesn't matter what kind of conservative you are. Our party needs all of you. And we need you to go out and find more people who share our beliefs. Please stay involved, be bold, think, challenge the mainstream media. Don't take their narrative as fact. Check out smart, independent, objective organizations that are growing all the time, like the Post-Millennial or True North. There are other places to get information. Let's stop being the silent majority.
Hey, I agree with Andrew Scheer. Stand up for independent media and listen to and watch True North. This is great. And the mainstream media just lost their minds on this. If you look at Twitter, I don't even have time to go through all of them, but the mainstream media just completely went crazy over the assertion that, hey, maybe they don't get to have the monopoly on communicating. And this was something that was just, I thought, entirely valid that he was saying. One person jumped on him and said, this was a Wall Street Journal a columnist or reporter in Ottawa had tweeted about it and said, oh, you know, Andrew Scheer says conservatives should watch True North and Post-Millennial. And then Andrew Scheer actually responded on Twitter, as you can see, and said, no, all Canadians need to. So again, thank you very much for the plug, Andrew Scheer. You had people like David Aiken and Justin Ling and all of these mainstream reporters who, in some cases, David Aiken I don't think is an ideologue, but he's very snarky, and he's always been very snarky when it comes to independent media. Or Dale Smith, who's in the Parliamentary Press Gallery, who posted some weird meme when Andrew Scheer said people should pay attention to independent voices. Again, the Parliamentary Press Gallery has proven to just not like any competition whatsoever. They don't want anyone playing in what they think is their sandbox. So the mainstream media's response to this idea is exactly why the idea has such merit and weight among conservatives. Because conservatives do not feel like their voices and their values and their ideas are adequately or even marginally acknowledged by the mainstream media, but the mainstream media still thinks that it gets to be the gatekeeper to truth. So this is all something that I think is coming to a head in the conservative movement, and something that the next conservative leader and the team they put around them needs to be aware of. So that's where I think we're headed with this, and I would like to see absolutely more of this. So this is where I'm going to go into a bit of the technical side of things now that we've started with the broader aspects, because this was just an absolute gong show from the start. As I mentioned earlier, supposed to start at 6 p.m. and ended up having just a complete delay after delay after delay. And I was very pleased to be doing a live show and had people watching. And we had, I think, no fewer than 900 people watching at any given time on YouTube, plus more on Facebook. It went on so long that Facebook capped us at 8 hours and said, oh, no, you can't do a live show longer than 8 hours, which at that point was just like sad, because it was a reminder that we had been doing it for 8 hours. But we didn't end. We just restarted the Facebook stream and carried on. But what happened that I thought was interesting is they had this ballot counting error where the ballot machines were eating some of the ballots, and as many as thousands of these ballots were destroyed by the machine, which in retrospect means they probably shouldn't have put Banksy in charge of procuring the ballot machines. That could have been entirely predicted if you had really looked too much into that. And the other point that I would raise is that when a machine starts just destroying documents without you asking it to, I can only imagine that has just put in a bulk order for that same machine. So the Kielburgers surely are wanting to know the make and model of those machines so that they can, outfit their offices and real estate all over Toronto and the world with them. But it was kind of embarrassing, and I don't know whether it can be entirely and squarely put in that category of, stuff happens, or if it's something that really reveals a broader disorganization. Because presumably when you're counting these ballots and you start the second the deadline hits on Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, you know the pace you're going and you know if you're getting them. So I don't know what it was about this, and I'd be interested in hearing from the party about this, that made it so that it was only in the 11th hour that they could say, oh yeah, these problems have just started. And was it all machines? Was it how many machines did they have running? Were they able to work around that? So it sounded like they had to really just pull the machine or pull the ballots out of the machines, and the ones that were shredded, they had to duplicate them so that they could feed them back in. It sounds like it was a process. And again, everyone starts getting a bit conspiratorial about it. This was supervised by representatives of all of the campaign teams. So no one is challenging the legitimacy of the result. And if you look at the numbers, it was fairly decisive. And we have a pretty significant number there. So when we look at the overall results, what are we likely to see moving forward? Well, Erin O'Toole, leader of the Conservatives. That much we know. Leslyn Lewis has said she is sticking around for the long haul. She's going to run. Erin O'Toole, it sounds like, has been very encouraging of this. We don't know if she's going to run in the riding she ran in 2015, which was in Scarborough. There's a York Centre by-election coming up, potentially, so could she jump into York Centre? Is she going to run in another riding? We don't know. But it sounds like she has very quickly catapulted herself to what would have been just an unknown candidate in the GTA to being one of the biggest stars in the next generation of the Conservative Party of Canada. And whether that's deserved or not, that's the reputation she now has. And that's something that will be important to harness. And it's also going to be something that's important for Erin O'Toole to harness. And the reason I say that is because he cannot forget that she delivered in no small part the win. And it's not to discount his team's efforts. Obviously, when it's a ranked ballot, you have to have your own support and that of others. But she was the one that delivered a chunk of votes. And if you look at the numbers of those, 10,000 some odd votes or points that she had in round 2, of those, over 7,000 went to Erin O'Toole and just under 3,000 went to Peter MacKay. I mean, that's hugely decisive. You can't get a more clear-cut victory than that. And when ultimately he wins with 57%, not the 51-49% that people were fearing based on the 2017 results between Maxime Bernier and Andrew Scheer and so on. So she's going to be around. Derek Sloan as well. I mean, he's in the caucus. He's a member of parliament. He is someone who, again, is going to be sticking around by virtue of being a sitting MP. What I don't know from Derek Sloan is how much of a role he'll be given in the party moving forward. He's been a bit of a pariah, and there was that ousting attempt on him from the comments he had made about Theresa Tam. And Erin O'Toole claims that he actually stood up for Derek and pushed back against some of the cancellors from within the party. So Erin O'Toole may have a soft spot for Derek Sloan, or simply just it's a soft spot for free speech. But I would like very much for Sloan to be incorporated into the shadow cabinet in some way. In fact, I would like all the leadership candidates to be incorporated into that, if I know it works out well when they're elected. And, for the ones that don't have seats, that's a different question. Here's the question I have. Is Peter MacKay going to run back to his law practice, or is he going to jump back into politics with both feet? It was a messy campaign. And I've seen a lot of people who were on the dueling teams that have buried the hatchet and congratulating each other on social media, which is, honor among political strategists. It's an important axiom. But for Peter MacKay, I don't know if he has any interest in being someone else's minister again, or if he was only interested in coming back if he was going to be the one at the top. And to be fair, I haven't asked the MacKay campaign this because, as a general rule, they just haven't been responding to our requests. But that will be something to watch. I mean, was he actually interested in getting back in and serving again, or was it that he just wanted to be prime minister? And those two are sometimes very different things. So that'll be something that we need to keep an eye out for. I had mentioned earlier in the show the mainstream media's reaction to the Andrew Scheer comments about the mainstream media. Let's look at some of the other negative reaction to Erin O'Toole. Now, to be fair, Justin Trudeau posted a congratulatory message, but the Liberal War Room had sent out a press release like minutes after Erin O'Toole started speaking, in which they congratulated him and then went and just trash talked the Conservatives. I'm looking at this here. The line in the email that is attributing it to someone attributes it to the president of the Liberal Party, Suzanne Cowan, so not to Justin Trudeau or anything. She says, on behalf of Liberals across Canada, I want to congratulate Erin O'Toole on becoming the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada and the official opposition. I have great respect for those who put their name on a ballot and step forward to contribute to our democracy. And she goes on later about the fact that we have an opportunity to do all these other things. But then we hope that Mr. O'Toole will reconsider continuing to push the same policies of Stephen Harper and Andrew Scheer that he proposed in the leadership campaign. They would take Canada backwards by making harmful cuts to services that Canadians count on, weakening Canada's gun control laws, rolling back our work to fight climate change, and much more. Great. That's why he won. I like the much more part of that. He's going to do all those things and more. Great. What a bonus. But this is the thing, and I know that the Liberals have a role to play. Their job is to be critical of whoever is elected. But, no matter what, no Conservative leader would have earned them or earned an endorsement from them. They were always going to say, oh yeah, no, it's going to be terrible. So Erin O'Toole is now being hit with that magic word, cuts. Cuts, cuts, cuts. And that's going to be the word you hear everything about from now until the election and even beyond. That's going to be what the media and the left are trying to put at Erin O'Toole's feet. And, one of the things, the fact that he was so unequivocal about CBC defunding means CBC is going to go to war against him. He's talked about rolling back the media bailout fund, so the mainstream media is going to go. And let's take a look at Jerry Dias, who's the head of Unifor, the union that represents most print journalists in Canada who are unionized. Jerry Dias tweeted out early Monday morning, Erin O'Toole elected as leader of the Conservative Party of Canada after being endorsed by his buddy Jason Kenney, who is actively attacking workers' rights in Alberta. It's clear O'Toole is no friend to working people. And then he's got the photo of angry O'Toole there, who was, looks like, in question period in some form. So the Unifor guy is already declaring that Erin O'Toole is the bad guy, which means the union president for most Canadian journalists has already decided that Erin O'Toole is the bad guy. And we saw this in the last election. Remember the resistance when you had Unifor and all of its team devoting every waking hour to defeating Andrew Scheer? Now, I don't know if he lost the election because of Unifor, but certainly the union didn't do him any favors. And look, if they want to have their stance, that's fine. But let's understand what we're dealing with here. And the fact that you can have unionized journalists whose union is actively campaigning against someone and have people accept that there is objectivity there is wrong. And incidentally, in many cases, the journalists have no choice. You have to work in a particular newsroom, join the union. A lot of them are fair, unbiased, impartial. They're everything you need to be. But there are some who aren't. There are some who are voting in these union policies and union representatives that are declaring war against Conservatives. So it's already started. And this is the whole point. When Erin O'Toole says the work starts now, the opposition's work has started. I don't mean the official opposition as far as Conservatives, but the resistance to Conservatives. That fight started immediately as well. And to go back to the comments I made earlier about the importance of the next leader digging their heels in, this is what Erin O'Toole has to do. No, the Mr. Nice Guy routine is not going to cut it. And it didn't work for Andrew Scheer, who tried to be liked and tried to be amiable and tried to be convivial with the media. It didn't work. And in the end, he ultimately started to punch a bit. And Erin O'Toole, I would suggest you start the punch now. Start the punch now, because that is the best way of pushing back against this. Show that you're not a shrinking violet. Show that you're up to the fight. And show Conservatives that they voted you into the leadership role that you have for a reason. For a reason. I just want to make one observation, if I may, about the system that elected Erin O'Toole as Conservative leader, because I realize for people that aren't just immersed in this stuff day in, day out, it's actually very challenging to understand exactly how things went the way they did. So the way it works is every riding has 100 points, whether it's Abitibi-Témiscamingue, Quebec, or Calgary Centre, doesn't matter. Every riding is worth 100 points. So when all of the members mail in their ballots, those are tied to the riding. But here's where things get interesting. Yes, it's a ranked ballot, but if you have a riding like Calgary West that has thousands of members and they each have a vote that is worth their share of the 100 points, basically. So, you know, if you've got 10,000 members, which is a ridiculous number, let's say 1,000 members, well, every vote is worth less than in a riding in Quebec or something that has 20 members, in which case every vote is worth 5 points. So typically votes are worth a fraction of a point, but in some really small ridings, they're worth more than a point. So I hope I haven't confused you more by saying that, but it means that winning over support in areas that aren't conventional Conservative strongholds actually helps you in a leadership race. And the one real number that we saw that revealed that was Erin O'Toole's showing in Quebec. And again, Quebec is not an area that elects a lot of Conservatives typically, but they still have Conservatives there. They have Conservative apparati in play, and Erin O'Toole did a lot to campaign to that. He had a specific Quebec platform. He didn't have that for any other provinces. And if you look at the numbers, he had an incredibly strong showing in Quebec. The numbers on the first ballot had O'Toole at 3,532 points and McKay at 2,685. Now, for neither to be a native French speaker, winning over Quebec support is going to be a bit of a challenge. Lewis and Sloan were behind at 781 and 802, respectively. But Quebec, the second most populous province in the country, gave O'Toole a huge leg up in those and really served as the foundation for the support that he picked up on the second ballot and ultimately the third and final ballot. So it shows, I mean, you got to play your campaign to the system. I know the O'Toole campaign had been very confident, and I would say almost cocky going into it. And I was talking to a couple of people from the O'Toole campaign throughout the course of the evening on Sunday night, and they were saying, listen, I mean, we stand by our numbers. It wasn't just that feeling. They had said they had data, and the data ultimately proved to be correct. So certainly a good endorsement for whoever was responsible for making their predictions and projections and doing their exit polling. I know this has been a bit of a different show than usual, playing a couple of clips, talking about some of the themes, but as we are standing here the day after the Conservative Party of Canada leadership race, the long-awaiting results in, I thought it was important to devote the entire episode to focusing on not just the result itself, but the themes, the story that drove that, and we will have a more in-depth analysis on the show on Wednesday. This is Canada's most irreverent talk show, The Andrew Lawton Show. Thank you, God bless, and good day, Canada.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.